All right, we are going to go ahead and get started here. Welcome everyone to River Reflections. My name is Katie Bedrich with Colorado River Alliance. And if you are tuning in for the first time, welcome. To give you a little bit of background on River Reflections, this is our free online speaker series. We do these once a month, the last Thursday of each month. And we cover a range of topics connecting Texans with their river, relating to the economy, ecology, education, and we've been really fortunate to have a ton of great guest speakers here with us. Today's topic is nice and timely, just as things are starting to really heat up in the Texas summer. We have with us Leslie Uppinghouse from Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center and Ted Maas from Maas Verde Landscaping. So today we're going to be talking about WaterWise gardening and landscaping and ways to save water, especially during these really hot and dry months, and how WaterWise gardening can help us keep some water in our Texas Colorado River. So without further ado, I'm going to let our speakers introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about what they do at their businesses. And let's start with you, Leslie.
Hi, I am Leslie Uppinghouse. I'm the lead horticulturist for the Central Gardens East here at the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center. For those of you who are joining us from outside of Austin, that is the State Botanical Garden here in Austin, Texas. And I share the lead position with two other women. So there are three lead gardeners for the whole center. And our property is about 184 acres. But with cultivated gardens right around, I think it's under 10 acres of cultivated gardens, and the rest are managed wild spaces. And so our botanical garden is native plants here in Texas, and that isn't just Central Texas, but it represents all of Texas. And so we're a public garden.
Thank you, Leslie. And then Ted Maas, can you tell us a little bit about your business and what you do?
Yes, thank you guys very much for having me. My name is Ted Maas, owner operator of Maas Verde Landscape Restoration. We started back in 2015, so we've been in business for about five to 6 years, going on 6 years. Been full-time since 2018, and we try to view landscape design and install through an ecological lens, using primarily native plants. Whenever we can, we obviously work with homeowners and landowners, but we try to do things like use stormwater on even as a resource for designing and implementing a plant design, and we try to increase biodiversity in the urban and rural environment. We also do land management stuff as well. We help out with prescribed burns and restoration activities, ecological restoration on private land. So yeah.
Awesome, thank you. And to those of us joining as well, I forgot to mention that if you have any questions for our speakers throughout the discussion, you can go ahead and drop them in the chat here on Zoom, or leave a comment on the Facebook live stream, and we'll have some time at the end of the discussion to answer audience questions. So moving on to my next question for our speakers. How do you interpret the word WaterWise, or what does WaterWise gardening and landscaping mean to you in your field? I'll go to you, Ted. You told us just a little bit about some of the methods and things that y'all do. But yeah, what does WaterWise mean to you?
I think first of all, recognizing that and being aware that fresh water is a finite resource, and really kind of embracing that fact, and therefore kind of planning your life around that, I guess. when you brush your teeth or whatever, turning off the faucet, doing, simple things like that. Try not to, spend 15 minutes in the shower or whatever. And then also from a landscape perspective, kind of getting using native plants that are adapted to our climate and our changing climate, and getting away from things like a huge St. Augustine lawn that requires a lot of water. It may work in Houston, but it doesn't necessarily work terribly well without supplemental water in Austin or Central Texas. So that's just kind of planning your property around that water is finite and valuable, fresh water.
I love that. Thank you. Definitely a big message for us at Colorado River Alliance in all of our education programs, being WaterWise in all aspects of our lives, like you said, considering how you're conserving water no matter what activity you're doing. Leslie, what about you? What does a WaterWise person look like to you, and how do you sort of be WaterWise in your field and your life? And I think we have you on mute.
Great,
Zoom
thank
is
you.
fun.
So just to feed off of what you and Ted were saying, I love that that you guys use that term WaterWise rather than just thinking about conservation and lack of use. I always think about really wise to me is it needs to be an active thinking. So you have to really be planning and thinking not only about how you use water, but to be more also at this stage in the game of where we are, and we're going to talk more deeply about it in terms of climate, but that you're actively, if you're using water at all, that you are not only just taking that water, taking that finite resource away, but that you're thinking more about how can you keep that resource and use every little drop, but yet maybe even go beyond that and restore some ways to actually create and hold water. So yes, those days of St. Augustine, solely because you're expected to have that in your yard because everybody else has it in your yard and you're not using that yard for recreation or for something specific. I think those days are long gone. And I would think that those days have been long gone for the past 10 years. And we need to think more about if you are going to have any landscaping that uses water at all, that you really have an active reason as to why. Meaning, are you growing a vegetable garden? Do you have a little lawn patch that you need for your dogs and your kids to play in? Like really going that extra step. And then planting, for me as a landscaper and as a gardener, I'm looking at plants, not individual plants, and what can work well with the least amount of water. I'm going to use water, but I'm going to use water to hold rainwater that comes in. So I'm thinking about building plant communities and adding plants and keeping those big trees and looking at where I can create shade so I'm not using so much energy. So it's sort of a holistic approach. And to me, the WaterWise is the wisdom of, if you are using water at all, that you're making conscious and active decisions as to how you're using it. And then you can get into the activity of upping up your game and collecting water. Are you collecting every drop of water that's falling on a rainstorm? How are you using that water? Are you using a bird bath? Are you collecting the drippage that comes from a leaky faucet? So inside and outside of your house, but also with landscaping, that you are actually planting things so that your property doesn't become a desert and it doesn't become a heat spot. You know, especially in the urban areas, when you're really working in these hot Texas heats, those landscapes that are lush and green and have lots of plants, somebody who's not WaterWise might drive by and go, well, that uses a lot of water. Whereas in fact, those perennial plants that in those established gardens are using much less, if any, water at all than people that switch out their gardens every season or put in, you know, flashy annuals, but change them out every season and just have gravel around their thing, thinking that they're being xeric and thinking that they're conserving water, but are you really actively using your landscape to up the water and contain the water so that it can get back into the aquifer cleanly and filtered through?
Yeah, that is a lot of really good information. And I like how you mentioned looking, below the surface and learning more about the different plants and landscaping that's around us and not making assumptions based on what a plant or landscaping looks like. So Leslie, are those some things that happen at the Wildflower Center? Some of those things that you mentioned?
Yeah, so we here at the center, it was fun because right before I came into the meeting, I jumped outside the office of like, hey guys, what's our updated of how much water do we collect off our roof line? So when the center was built, it was built with the intention that the architecture fed into the idea of utilizing natural materials and stone that is from the area, but also collecting all the water that we can off of every inch of our roof line. So before the family garden was built, and there's a big roof line that was added to that of the pavilion, we were stating that we collected over 70,000 gallons of water. On a good rainstorm with the added pavilion, that can jump up between like 86,000, and some would argue on a heavy rainstorm, 100,000 gallons of rainwater that goes directly into our well system and our pump. And that is what we use to irrigate our entire landscape off of. Now, obviously, people don't have multi-building properties. Some of you might, but you would be amazed in a good hard Texas rainstorm how much water you can collect off of a 10-minute rain. So, I'm really trying to engage the general public into empowering themselves to really look into a gutter system on every piece of roof line that you have. It's not a big investment. And if you have a water tank system, I have a 1,200 gallon system at home, and I have gutters on all of my roof line, I can use that water in that tank all summer long. I just use rainwater and I never run out. And right when I get to the point where I think I'm going to run out, it'll rain, and it can rain for half an hour and almost fill that thing halfway up, depending on how hard that rain is. So again, as our climate is changing so radically, we're seeing these bigger times without rain. And then when we do get those rains, we're getting harder rain and more severe weather. So again, I think, now is the time, if you haven't done it already, to really think about collecting the water that you can, because we can collect a lot. And there's literally no excuse to be using City of Austin water for landscaping at this point anymore. I really don't believe that. I think anybody can utilize the water that you're collecting from these good heavy rains if you have a catchment system.
That's a great point. Yeah. And yeah, when it rains here, it pours. All that rain just a few weeks ago, thinking about, if everyone had really gone all in and collected as much as they could, where we would be in a few months from now. So thank you. Ted, you mentioned Maas Verde also does stormwater collection. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how y'all system works?
So thinking about stormwater as a resource, coming and like Leslie was saying, coming off of a impervious cover like a roof of a house, and instead of just piping that water directly to the street and to the storm drain, we're trying to slow down that water, use it on the landscape. It kind of provides an opportunity to also add more plant diversity that don't mind their feet or the roots, being saturated for short durations of time during a hard rain event or just any rain event. And so therefore you can add more diversity on an urban landscape. Which is good. And City of Austin has rebate programs as well for rain gardens. It's kind of a term that is used for using stormwater. slowing it down and using it on the landscape. Also for water catchment, and Leslie, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that the city of Austin provides rebate programs for water catchment systems as well. So there's a financial incentive for using stormwater in various ways on the landscape, and yes, and getting away from using city water to irrigate plants on the landscape.
Great, thank you. And thank you for mentioning those programs with the city for our viewers as well to learn about those financial incentives. So thinking about WaterWise and obviously collecting and using and retaining every drop of water that we can get. When it comes to the types of plants, if someone is just starting out, let's say they just moved here to Central Texas, they don't know a thing about native plants or how, that could really help them on their WaterWise gardening journey. What are some basic native plants that maybe everyone should know about if they're thinking of kind of starting gardening 101? And I'll go to you first on this, Leslie.
So I'm going to backtrack a little bit on just to be super nerdy. So I have to be careful that I don't go into the weeds of just where everybody's eyes are rolling. But for me, there are definitely plants that do well with less water. But I think the most important thing to keep in mind with somebody, let's say somebody moving to Austin or to Texas at all, or any new place in any state, is walk outside in your new property and stick a shovel in the ground and take a look at what that dirt is. I think it's less important to know from an individual plant what its water and light needs are. I think it's more important to know what kind of dirt and what kind of environment and community of plants would you normally find it in nature. So when you're talking about native plants, you may find a plant that it says on paper doesn't take a lot of water, but if you look at where that plant lives naturally, what county it's living in and what state it's living in, you might find that it's from Florida or that it's from East Texas, and you live way over in West Texas and you've got caliche limestone soil. So the first thing for me in terms of WaterWise and not using unnecessary resources, and this would be an unnecessary water or unnecessary fertilizer, or re-amending the soil. A lot of people are like, oh, amend your soil. I'm a big believer of embrace the soil that you have. Here in Texas, we have thousands and thousands of species that are very specific to the soil where they naturally grow. And in the state of Texas, and this isn't quite so true with all states, but our state is very unique, that we have many different soil types, and they're geographically laid out in these sort of like more like fingers. So sort of thinking of the state of Texas, and if you looked at it upside down, you would see these soil types of blackland prairie or caliche chalk prairie or sandy loam. And so it's not necessarily broken up in nice square chunks of regions. There are regions, but underground, just the way we are, we're such a big state that you can be very, very far away from East Texas, but might have a little finger of sandy loam or clay that goes way down into Central Texas. And so it doesn't take a lot of Google searching or checking out books in your library. You can find this information really easy. So if you start from that standpoint of what type of soil you have, then start to look at what plants do well in that soil, then start to look at what their light requirements are, and then you can start to get in the weeds about what kind of water, amended water they would need. Now, in theory, if you're doing it right, once those plants are established, they don't need any water. So if you look around in nature and you walk in the woods or you walk along the beach or you walk in the blackland prairie, no one's walking out there watering it, right? It's getting natural rainwater. And so once those plants are established, what your goal to do, again, this goes into the wiseness, your goal is to have a landscape that does not need additional water. I think if you do that type of research and start there, then you can get into the weeds of what plants are going to be more drought tolerant. And this is where we've all come out of this big freeze We have to really look at how our temperatures are changing and how our waters are changing, and looking at those dramatic weather events. So to Ted's, he brought up rain gardening. I'm getting more and more questions about how to create a rain garden. A lot of people don't know that term, but what that basically is catching that water that's whooshing in so that it doesn't wash away your foundation or your garage or your whole landscape, is creating berms and creating areas to catch that water that's moving too quickly. So those are sort of extenuating circumstances. So I always say, start with the ground, start with your dirt, and then go from there. Then you have this wide variety of plants that you can choose that need maybe a little less, maybe a little more. And if you're building those plant communities, you don't have to necessarily have cactus. You don't have to have a garden of just cactus. And so xeric gardening, and that term of xeric gardening was really great as a term 20 years ago and got people to think about water. But I do think there's a plethora of plants and really worthwhile plants that wouldn't necessarily on paper look like they need less water. But if they're planted in the right community and in the right environment, they don't need any water at all once they're established. So I know that kind of skipped your question entirely, but I get a little bit spooked about just naming plants, because that could work for somebody in Central Texas and not work for somebody in West Texas, if that makes sense. And the data's out there. The names are out there. It's all out there.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, I'm learning so much, and that's what we're here for, right? We're here to learn from the experts about these things. So Ted, do you have anything to add? Is it similar the way you go about things at Maas Verde? Are you looking at soil and other conditions?
Yes, definitely, and I love that. Yeah, I'm starting with the soil and then planning your landscape around that. I mean, just even in Austin, Austin's a very unique is situated in a very unique geographic setting with all these different kind of biomes kind of merging into one area. And just in West Austin, west of Mopac, you're dealing with a lot more shallow soils, clay loam typically, and then over in east side of 35 is Blackland Prairie, or generally Blackland Prairie, much deeper soils, and therefore your plant palettes or plant lists can be very different based on just where you are, and just in a 5 mile as the crow flies area. So yeah, that's awesome. That focusing on the soil and working up from there.
And Ted, I would imagine, that you also do a lot of educating in your business. Obviously, clients probably seek you out who are looking to be WaterWise and who are looking to have more water conscious landscapes and things like that. Do you run into that a lot? Are you explaining a lot to clients and kind of educating them on WaterWise landscapes and making the best choices?
Yeah, definitely. A lot of what I run into is and Leslie touched on it, this idea of xeriscaping, XERI scape. And with that, I guess a lot of folks that I've run into are talking about putting gravel everywhere and using succulents, and they want low maintenance as well, where to me that's like that's the highest maintenance situation you can have, because you're pouring gravel on top of pretty biologically productive soil, and of course weeds and everything are going to try to poke through any kind of fabric or gravel you put down, and I don't think people really grasp that we have a lot more of a diverse plant palette to choose from than just like agave and soltils and prickly pear, or spineless prickly pear. So yeah, I think That's probably the biggest one that I run into, and I have to just kind of talk people down from going that direction. So, yeah.
And so obviously the goal is to, like you both mentioned, is to establish gardens and landscapes that you don't need to water. You don't need to use that city water, that Texas, Colorado River water to maintain your plants. But if someone isn't quite there yet with their rainwater collection, what tips do you have to be conservative, at least with your watering? I know there's factors like the time of day that you water, maybe different irrigation systems or things like that. Do y'all have any comments on, if you're watering your plants, how should you be doing it? Leslie?
Sure. And so and again too, because I don't want to be snobby and that folks that are listening today go, well, I don't know how to do all that. And I don't know what all these plant communities are. But if you can just think around, there's definitely some general principles. So let's say you're putting in new landscape to a space and you're kind of starting from scratch. You can have your sentimental favorites and you can have year-round showy color in your front yard. And every plant that you're putting in the ground is going to need some water to get going, right? So I'm not saying that you have to do this magically. So if you can then think about, ideally, if you're collecting water from your roof line, there are all sorts of great home garden. You don't have to necessarily hire a landscaper or irrigation specialists, not landscapers, because definitely having a maintenance gardener and someone installing it for you, if you can afford to do that, is a great way to go to kind of get you going with somebody who's knowledgeable and can help you. And there's terrific companies that are out there, and Ted's being one of them. And so there's lots of experts, so you don't have to wing it, because you can spend an awful lot of money and make a ton of mistakes. But you don't have to do that. If you're one of those people that's a DIY and you like to build things, start with your dirt. Think about your dirt. Think about your layout of the slope of your property. You can create cool berms. If you notice on a rainy day that all your water is whooshing right past your property, you can collect that water and kind of work with the physical topography of your lot or your landscape. And then if you do want to put in some supplemental irrigation systems, I'm a big fan of easy home. You can put drip irrigation on either your water catchment system and with a timer. Those are really cool. You can buy these like self timers that work really well. So that's great. You start out with buying your plants, do your research, really lay out. I'm always a big fan of having something of interest year round. That's one of the big things that we work on here at the Wildflower Center, is to engage the public into understanding that you can have interest all year round. It takes some doing and it takes some strategy. It's kind of like cooking. So you kind of think about your recipe and think about your ingredients and think about what it's going to look like in the winter as well as in the summer. And so by doing that, you're building plant communities. And so when you're doing all of these things, your end result is that you're checking a lot of boxes. You're planting things on purpose that give you enjoyment. Ideally, you're providing wildlife and natural resources back into the environment, which is really important here. We're in, the 6th largest extinction of plant and animals right now. So anything that any homeowner can do to kind of restore that habitat, even yard by yard, is really important. But then it's win-win, right? You have interest all year round. But you do have to water those plants when they're young. And so think about the size of plants that you're putting in. And their success, and then little simple things like you want to make sure to run your irrigation at the coolest times of the night. And so here in Central Texas at night, it doesn't cool off until about 2 o'clock in the morning. So ideally it's between the hours of 2 and 9 a.m. At the latest. I like to try to get all my watering done here at the center before 8 a.m. You can set those timers bright and early in the morning. And then really make sure, to Ted's point, that you're not just dumping a bunch of gravel everywhere thinking that you're saving water, because that actually really collects a lot of heat, and you want to keep that heat sort of away from your home and away from your property. And by doing that, creating shade through plants, and reducing all that bare ground is going to reduce the weeds. It's going to reduce the maintenance. You're going to fill it with plants that you want and not plants that you don't want. And so it's a little bit counterintuitive visually that you think, well, I'm adding all these plants, I'm going to use all this water. Yes, you're going to use some water in those first year and a half, and then you're pretty much good to go. And learn also the plant life behavior, meaning like life cycle is the word I'm looking for. Sorry, between perennials and annuals. A lot of people do not know that, and they will plant plants that they see that are pretty at the nursery, and then in the winter they say, oh, they all died, and then they rip them out and plant them more. It's like, nope, they're just dormant. Those were perennial plants. It's the number one mistake that we see over and over and over again at our plant sale, that to me is a little bit shocking, but I've now accepted that many people do not know the difference between a perennial and an annual plant. So you want your annuals to be reseeding, and you want your perennials to go dormant in that winter. They need that dormancy. So you need to have stuff to fill in that blank space year round. So that's a long-winded answer to your question, but yeah, know your plant life cycle, choose your plants wisely, and diversify. You want lots and lots of species in your environment if that pleases you. Don't hesitate. The more, the merrier.
Yeah, that's great information. I'm definitely hearing some overarching themes of, thinking long term, having patience, really investing in your gardening and your landscape, and that's just an issue with conservation in general, isn't it? We're as a society not always thinking in the long term and in those cycles as nature does. So we got to work with it, not against it. And yeah, thinking about the seasons that we have here in Central Texas, some might say we don't have any. We have one big one. But I'm curious, Ted, what does your work look like, kind of changing with the seasons? Like, what are you doing now, mostly in July versus December?
Yeah, great question. And if you don't mind, I just want to back up a little bit and just add a few
Yeah,
things
please.
to what Leslie was saying. Time of year is a really important consideration when planting. Spring and fall, or really fall, is the ideal time to plant trees and woody species, especially if you don't have an irrigation system irrigation is kind of a limited resource. You don't want to plant or spend the money on a 30-inch box, 30 by 30-inch box oak tree and plant it in July. The likelihood of it surviving is a lot lower. And so setting your plants up for success. And then one other thing is, and what we like to do when we're planting plants is planting the plant slightly below grade, below the existing grade, and creating a little bit of a well, so that if you're watering by hand, all that water that you're watering, you can water in this little well that you've created, and it infiltrates into the soil profile directly to the root system, instead of kind of running off and not really getting to the root system. So just that simple planting technique can really, I think, save a lot of water, and you're using your water a lot more effectively. So I guess from December, what we usually do in December versus this time of year. Right now we're doing a couple landscape installs. We have a great landscape designer, Veronica, and she's awesome, and she has developed some designs that we're building right now. doing a lot of boulder work, and doing stormwater. We're right now building a kind of ephemeral stream just to catch stormwater, slow it down before it runs off into the street or overflows into the street. In the wintertime, our tree work, we do tree trimming and arborist type work. We have a great certified arborist, Lance, on staff, and he's a magnificent climber and very knowledgeable. So yeah, we do various things. We do everything from tree work down to irrigation. So we stay pretty busy year round. In springtime, everybody kind of wants, especially after the freeze, we did a lot of pulling out dead plants, and usually the dead plants were non-natives, which was really interesting for us to see. And it's like Mother Nature is our most valuable salesperson or saleswoman. So it's kind of everybody wants plants that are going to last and survive in this ever-changing climate that we're experiencing.
Yeah, I would imagine the freeze took a lot of people by surprise, certainly. And do you think it will have a lasting impact on your clients, Ted and Leslie, the folks that are coming to the Wildflower Center, and you're educating who may have never experienced something like this before? What advice, I guess, would you have for people that moving forward, should we expect something like this? Should people kind of put that into their planning going forward, or do those people think that nothing like that could ever happen again? What's some advice on an extreme weather event that we experienced?
I personally, I'm not, I don't have a crystal ball or anything, but and I'm not a climatologist, but I would just, I would plan for these sorts of extreme events, whether they're, drought or heat or cold snaps, or, these just kind of really far swinging pendulum type weather events. I think, I'd go ahead and mentally prepare, and maybe even physically prepare for these sorts of events occurring on a more regular basis. It just for me, it just seems like every year is something is some sort of climate extreme is being thrown at us. So yeah, I would say kind of buckle up.
Yeah, and keep learning about these things and keep educating ourselves on what's happening with the plants and Mother Nature, like you said. Leslie, how was it out at the Wildflower Center with the freeze?
Yeah, so we were in the same boat as everybody else. We've never had temperatures that low for that long. We've never had that heavy of an ice and that much of snow. We have only native plants on property. So it was a really great laboratory to really look at what happened. A lot of things surprised me personally, and a lot of things I was pleased to trust that what I thought would happen happened. So many, and things that surprised the general public is pretty much anything that was under that 6 inches of snow that was native did just fine, because snow is a great insulator. So that really, so all the dainty stuff, like even our bluebonnets and little dainty things coming up in the springtime, because remember when that happened, that was really early spring, right? So that's a really early growth time for the plants here in Central Texas. And so all of that little stuff was just fine. It was specifically the tall Fabaceae trees and shrubs. So that would be from the pea and bean family. They were leafing out. So things like your mesquites, your palo verdes, your huisache trees, your mountain laurels, all of those trees in that family were leafing out right at that moment, and they took the heaviest hit. So it's tough to tell, and we lost a lot. We lost a lot of Weisach trees all over the county. The mountain laurels took a heavy hit with all that ice. Some we lost entirely, some of our older ones, some are rebounding sadly, and they look terrible, but they're going to make it. We have a thornless mesquite that didn't make it. We had a Mexican olive that is only native to just a little itty bitty bit of Texas, and it did not make it. And it made me really sad because it's my favorite tree on the property and we only had one. I still haven't cut it down because I'm just kind of in denial. But it was good to see. And then the other thing that was super interesting, where again, people are thinking they're being WaterWise and being conservative by only planting cactus, things like the agaves and the prickly pears, those fleshy cactus, everything above that soil mushed. Underground, they're fine. The roots are fine. If you're cutting back those agaves, you're going to see pups coming up. But it was a good test. And just to, I think Ted put it nicely about the buckle up. I don't want to be doom and gloom, but I think it's good for everybody's mental health to be as realistic and honest about what we're seeing right in front of us. And this is worldwide, right? This isn't in Central Texas. It's not in, just America. It's all over the world. So then in terms of water specifically, and in terms of that resource, it's an equity question. There are places all over the world that we're going to see a lot of climate migration because they are literally not having water to sustain them. So then it kind of goes into the vanity of why you're planting what you're planting. And are you planting something because your HOA wants your yard to look pretty? I think those days are gone. I think people really need to check all the boxes if they're going to be adding landscaping. And if you're adding landscaping, you need to be thinking about how it is protecting your property, protecting your environment, protecting your health and your family's health. And that can be mental health as well. So pretty landscapes, but how are they regenerating and how are they serving, Mother Earth, and the planet? And because it's going to take everybody, all hands on deck. And a lot of that is the protection of property. Insurance companies are being some of the most vocal in, hey, everybody, we need to change our ways and think very seriously about how we're going to handle these extremes. We were all without water, most of us, during this freeze. And so all of a sudden, people not having drinking water coming out of that tap, that's a real wake-up call. But there are places all over the world right now that are having that problem going on and on and on and on. So we have to think real seriously about the why we're using water, how we're using water, and how we're taking care of ourselves and protecting our property and our health and the wildlife around us, because it's a slippery slope. If you start removing plant material, like, well, I don't want to take on any of that risk, you're not actually taking away the risk. If you're taking away plant life and you put down weed crop and then you're just throwing a bunch of, weed control on there and chemicals, and you're trying to force your sentimental plants and dumping a lot of fertilizer on that, all of those things they just back up into a sorry mess. So as a gardener, I am acutely aware that these plants all around me don't need my help to grow and to live at all. The planet would be so much better off if we just stepped back, right? So how can we be less handsy in our environment and be more stewardship into the success and health of our environment? That's going to protect us from these extremes. We want to build a resilient community. So it's not incremental changes that we need to be thinking about. We need to think about transformational changes in terms of our water systems, how we get water from point A to point B, how we're not losing water through evaporation, how we're capturing the water we can, not just for our own use, but to replenish that aquifer. So this goes down a whole other conversation about how we use our land and how we're developing our land and how we're developing our communities. Sprawl is not a great thing for the water, as you all know, working for the river. We got to really think about, as we're building these communities out into areas where there's wildfire areas and flooding areas and extreme weather areas, what are we doing? Why are we doing it? How are we doing it? And that's a big picture question, But I think as a homeowner, if you feel good about what you're doing on your own property and you're being as water wise as you can, you're doing the best you can. And then anything on top of that is a help to everybody. But I think, we need the political will, we need, the money and the infrastructure to start really buckling down and really protecting our communities.
Love that. Thank you so much, Leslie. And the education as well. I mean, just hearing from you and Ted and thinking about, Texas specifically at all of our privately owned land and how, like you said, homeowners and landowners can play such a huge role if we think collectively and think, like you said, kind of as part of the ecosystem and working with it. So love everything that you mentioned. You also mentioned earlier, being in this mass extinction of plant and animal life. And I'm just curious, is there anything, any, don't want to say small steps because we need bigger steps, but small steps for people to help any specific plants, any specific plant life, like especially here in Texas, are there any specific plants or things that people can be planting to help, restore any of these suffering species?
Can I jump in a little bit first? And then I'd like to hear Ted's take on it, because as a nursery, and he's growing plants, I believe, right? Yeah. So for me, one of the things that I do a lot with my volunteers and with the public is a lot of the best plants and not the best plants, but a lot of my favorite plants that are in real trouble in terms of their native habitat and that habitat disappearing so quickly are the little itty bitties or the odds and ends that you don't see in commercial nurseries. And I'm talking bigger commercial nurseries. Central Texas, we are blessed to have a lot of really great native nurseries that are able to propagate and grow our native plants. But there's a bunch of plants, and specifically out in the hill country and in areas of West Texas and East Texas, deep East Texas, that no one really knows, they don't know of them and they don't see them in commercial nurseries. So when you as a homeowner, because gosh, I used to know the exact number, but it's a crazy percentage of how much of the state of Texas is privately owned versus publicly owned, but it's in the 90 percentile, right? So over 90% of the entire state is privately owned, meaning that there is no public land protection for less than 10% of the whole state. So it's up to those private landowners that when you see little plants coming up, do not pull those little plants out without looking them up, because a ton of those little plants are little natives that grow in that tiny little area of your county and nowhere else on earth. So those are the ones that I am fiercely protective of. And as landowners, get to know what's supposed to be there, get to know what's historically there, and don't yank it out just because you don't know what it is and you assume it's a weed. Most of the fanciest and my favorites are the ones that you can't find commercially, and you don't want to pluck them out of their natural habitat and grow them in nurseries if those community and plant communities are so rare and so small and they're just being decimated by land development. So if you're in a new area in some new subdivision that's never been, a subdivision before, what's coming up out of that ground deserves to be there and historically needs to be there. And now you are the steward of that little plant community. So, and then, really, if you're adding to that, really utilize your native nurseries, because the native nurseries, in order for them to keep going, they need the population of clients to embrace the plants that they are growing. A nursery and a seed company is only as good as the customers that they get. And so they need to have people really embrace these plants that they have worked, really hard to figure out how to propagate commercially and to sell back into the community. And so again, you as the landowner are the steward of putting back what has been replaced in the building of that subdivision. So just because you moved into a subdivision and they've stripped down the mineral earth, every plant that's there to build that subdivision, if you want to, do your research, find out what was there and try to get it back. And certainly things coming up out of the ground, they're back. That seed bank was there. and you're lucky enough to be able to preserve that species. So, and then you don't really have to do anything. And if you're having those plant communities in, you're going to see the native birds, you're going to see the native bugs. Don't put the pesticides on there. And you are literally restoring wildlife habitat that is desperately needed to be preserved. And we don't have any public way to do that here in the state of Texas. So it's up to each and every one of us to do it.
Definitely. Yeah, nature can be resilient, but also needs our help right along with it. What about you, Ted? Are there any specific natives or plants that you're championing or wanting to help out in our area?
Yeah, I guess as far as kind of specific groups of plants, I'm a big grass person. I love grasses. I think due to overgrazing and land development, it's our deep-rooted herbaceous species have kind of been minimized or eliminated, and therefore, we have soil erosion issues. We have with our clay loam soils, water is not able to infiltrate deeper into the soil profile, so you have greater runoff rates. So I'm a big proponent of more kind of perennial grasses, like switchgrass and eastern gamagrass, and also those are big food sources for migratory birds and even resident birds, year-round resident birds species. Another one, I mean, your native milkweeds, definitely focusing on native antelope horn milkweed, which is super hard to find in the nursery setting, but they are out there. Just flowering plants, flowering woody species. Love buttonbush and those kinds of species that bring in a lot of pollinators and are food sources for a host of different species. I also like to just use the term ecological structure as kind of a framework for how I'm trying to come up with a plant design for a landscape, is kind of having your different structures of plants. So kind of a ground cover, working your way up to a grass, to shrubs, small trees, and then larger trees, and just kind of that different structure, those different groups of structures. It's just a really good framework to have when kind of planning out a landscape design or landscape plan. So I just kind of encourage folks to and like Leslie was saying earlier about really kind of filling up those spaces in a planting in any given planting area with those different hierarchies of plant structures is going to keep out weeds. It's going to develop into a functioning native plant community that is, again, going to be a lot less water, but it's also going to provide a lot of food source for a whole host of different species, and trying to promote that biodiversity. And kind of, I like to say, build it and they will come, or at least that's what helps me sleep at night. And so, I'm kind of hoping for that, I guess, in the long run.
Very cool. I also think it's National Pollinator Week or something like that.
Happy National Pollinator Week. We're doing Nature Night's pollinators tonight. Yeah.
Hey, there you go. Thursday night plans.
Can I jump in though and add, just because my favorite, I think that, kind of Ted brought up some great things of, grasses. And so my sort of favorite that I think people don't think about at all, to add to the layering, that I think Central Texas and Texas is really kind of a unique state in the plethora a lot of people don't think about woody mid-size shrubs and trees. We have a really amazing array of understory trees. And then, so these are trees and shrubs that are under 20 feet. So you can have your canopy oaks and your juniper ashes and some of the big, big tooth maple and things like that. But we have a ton of really interesting understory trees. So even, things like wafer ash and possum haw, or not possum, well, possum haws and persimmon trees, which are really neat. So there's all these kind of understory trees that fit under the layer of the big canopy that provides shade and protection, has those deep roots that Ted was talking about, and then underneath the grasses. So Central Texas, I mean, honestly, I haven't really been to a state that has as many understory woody plants and shrubs. And all of those usually will provide either nectar for the pollinators that really need it in the fall specifically, or fruit for birds and small mammals. So it's really, those understory trees and shrubs are really the food providers and the shelter for a lot of our animal species and bug species that are in distress right now. And those are a lot of plants that are available commercially. A lot of great nursery growers are growing them, and they're kind of the unsung heroes. And I would agree with Ted as well as the bunch grasses. There's a lot of cool grasses that are bunch grasses. You can go so much cooler than just an Augustine lawn, and certainly don't even get me started about Bermuda grass. People just need to try. There's so much out there that they would just win if you can get it in the ground.
Right. Don't be basic with your grass. St. Augustine is very out of fashion, is what I've been hearing. So we are coming up on 1 o'clock here. And I have one more question for our speakers. Not seeing questions in the chat from our audience, but I'll put that out there one more time. If you have any questions for our speakers, you can type those up now. I'm assuming it's because y'all were so thorough and so knowledgeable, and we are just digesting everything that we've learned today. But my final question for Ted and Leslie is, what is your favorite plant? Flower, grass, shrub? I know this is a very difficult question for plant folks like yourself. But Leslie, what is your favorite plant?
Oh my God. I don't have one because it's so many, but today's favorite, because I've been working with it today, is Berlandia lyrata, which is it's called chocolate flower, which is a perennial flowering plant. I think I sent you a little funny photograph of it. And it's not, wow, look at all this stuff on your screen. There it is. So that's a kind of a non-showy photograph of it, but that little flower in the center, the nectar smells exactly like hot chocolate or a good deep milk chocolate. And if you deadhead it throughout the summer, it will bloom pretty much from March, April, May. Yeah, May. And if you really deadhead it, it'll go all the way through to September. And it's just one that bees really go gaga over. Because it just has such a lovely smell, and it's just a super neat, sweet little flower. So that's today's favorite.
Wow, I had no idea. I was curious why it was where the name came from, and that is so cool that it actually smells like chocolate. And so that was called
It's Berlandia lyrata. Yeah.
But chocolate flower?
Yeah, chocolate flower. Yeah.
Okay.
It doesn't taste like chocolate. It is not edible,
okay.
But it smells very good. And it's always like the height, of a small child will walk by, and you'll see them. They'll walk by and they'll just be like, and you can tell that they smell the chocolate flower.
Like Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
Very much so, yeah.
All right, Ted, time to tell us your favorite plant.
Yeah, and I have to say, like Leslie, I really don't have one specific favorite plant, except I spent some time in Oregon in my 20s, and I did name my dog after the ponderosa pine tree. That's kind of one of my favorite trees. So yeah, his name is Pondo, and yeah, he's a sweetheart. But anyways, and then switchgrass, I would say, is just a very impressive plant. I've transplanted quite a bit of switchgrass for riparian areas and erosion control, and it's pretty amazing how one time I chopped up one large switchgrass plant and tried to get it to reroot in a container, in a potting black container, and within like I want to say it was like within 4 weeks or something, those roots that I had severed with a shovel, out of each cut root, there was like a web of new roots that had just exploded from that cut root. And I just find just the resilience of plants in general is just fascinating to me, and especially grasses. I have a special place in my heart for all grasses, but switchgrass is just a really interesting one. And I had heard about a PhD student out of A&M that did a study of if you took one mature switchgrass plant and if you had taken every single root and lined them up in a linear straight line, and I don't want to make up a number. I can't remember exactly what the result was, but he estimated that it would go for like 3 miles or something. Like, it's just those root systems are just so vigorous and can hold so much soil, and it's just so impressive.
I love it. I love how passionate y'all are about your plants, and such a great discussion today. So everyone, make sure you check out Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center. You might see Leslie out there, and check out Maas Verde Landscape and Restoration. I learned so much. I'm sure our audience learned so much from y'all as well about WaterWise gardening and landscaping. And thank you so much for being here. To everyone still on here, make sure you check out our next River Reflections. Again, the 4th Thursday of every month. And you can always shoot us a question or a suggestion for speakers and topics. So anything else you guys would like to add? Leslie, Ted, thank you so much for the discussion today.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much, Katie, for the invite. And yeah, anybody come on out to the center. Find me. I am the sweaty one, just shoveling away. So just please introduce yourself, say hi, I'd be happy to talk to you. But thank you so much, Katie, for the invite.
Yeah, and likewise, thank you all very much for having me. And yeah, feel free to look us up online, our website, maasverde.com. It's 2 A's with 1 S. And yeah, feel free to email me with any thoughts or questions. Love to answer them. So, or try at least.
All right. Thank you guys so much. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday and into the weekend. And everyone else, have a great day.
Take care. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you all.